Hello, everybody. Welcome back to On Dog Terms, where Sam and I talk your ear off about dog behavior. I'm your host, MJ. I'm here with my co host, Sam. Say hi, Sam.
Hi.
And today we are going to be talking about how to find a, a dog trainer that is a good fit for you, or how to navigate the dog training industry when you're looking for a dog trainer. Because I know that just a lot of the clients that I've talked to of mine, it's a very overwhelming process. There's so much information out there. There's a bunch of different training methods and different styles of training and services the trainers offer. And how do you find a good one that I kind of want to give people a roadmap on what to look for in that? So I figured we'd start by touching on why it's important to find the right dog trainer and not just hire the first dog trainer that you stumble upon. One of, I think, the biggest things, at least right now in this economy, is a lot of people are worried about money. I tend to work with a lot of people that have already worked with several other trainers. And I will be very honest in that my pricing for my programs is probably on the higher end of my location and all the other trainers around me. But I think what people fail to realize is that just because my price for a single lesson is higher than others, I can likely fix your problem much faster, and that happens a lot throughout this industry. So the more you have to go to a trainer, the more expensive that it is. So just upfront costs are not always a good indicator of price overall long term. And I see a lot of people get very frustrated when they're going to one trainer and it doesn't work. They go to a second trainer and it works for a month or two, and then they stop lessons and the dog reverts back. And there's a lot of frustration. So I think
Yep.
it's important for us to talk about, finding the right trainer and how do we do that. Do you ever see it in your business where clients are having issues bouncing around a lot?
Yeah, and I feel like I think I've noticed a lot of people not really understand the difference between like a results-based trainer versus a like package-based trainer. So like buying a package of lessons versus buying an end goal or a result. And I think that's people who really understand behavior tend to price themselves with a result versus X amount of package or like X amount of
Mhm.
lessons per package or whatever. And I have found that a lot of folks come to me with, "Oh, well, we've tried this place or we tried group classes here or this or that," and that they're still having some problems training their dogs or misunderstandings of why their dogs are still making these choices or doing these behaviors or so I look at that as more of an exciting way to teach one further step of why the dog's doing X, Y, or Z.
I have a controversial hot take that I'm sure is going to piss a lot of people off, but
I love it. Tell me.
I
I
love hot
love
takes, and I
controversy.
think that we need to be very, very transparent. I know that a
Yep.
lot of people, when they're shopping around for a dog trainer, are automatically deciding whether or not they want positive reinforcement or force free or whatever term you want to use, or a balanced trainer. And people tend to put
Or people
themselves,
don't even know what any of those words mean.
yep. And most people don't. And what I see a lot of is people will think, I want a positive only trainer, but they don't actually understand what a balanced trainer is. So they
Yep.
limit themselves in their options, and then they end up with a trainer that is not a good fit for them.
Yep.
I truly don't think people understand the difference. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, it's marketing, right? Like the whole dog training industry right now it's been this way for years. Everything is this way. There's a lot of stigma around certain words. So I actually had this conversation with a client of mine maybe a month or two ago. I trained her dog. Her dog was easy. I mean, typical excitable adolescent dog stuff. A lot of jumping, a lot of nipping, a lot of barking, puppy stuff, basically, but behavior, puppy stuff that was driving her up a wall. And we did her training program and it went so smoothly and the dog did so well. And one day I was talking to her. I do these little training meetups where my clients can come meet with me and we go on walks and things like that. It's really fun. But she said, "Oh, I was telling my friend about you and how you're such a wonderful positive only trainer." And I stopped her and I said, "Oh, I'm actually a balanced trainer." And she kind of paused and I said, "We used punishment with your dog." And she had this like look like of shock on her face. Now, I did every single lesson with her was a private lesson. So she was there. There was never a time where I was with her dog and she was not. So there was no like secrets or anything happening. And she's like, "What do you mean?" "No, we didn't." And I had to
Mhm.
explain to her the actual definition of what punishment is and that it doesn't
Yep.
always need to be this big, scary thing. So basically, what we had done with her dog is when people walk into her house, the dog is like, there's a hallway with a pet gate. So the dog's behind the pet gate. and the barking was driving her up a wall. Like he'd just get really excited and bark, bark, bark. So the first 2 lessons when I showed up, as I started to walk over to him, if he barked, I just immediately I said, "No." I turned around and I had her walk outside with me and we'd stay outside and chat about her goals. And it seemed really seamless to her because I was there. I just got there and we needed to chat about these things. We'd go outside. We'd do it a second time. As I approached, he barks. I said, "No." Turn around, leave. The third time he didn't bark anymore. And she never thought anything of that, but I taught her
Mhm.
how to have guests do that. And I never told her, "Oh, this is punishment," because it's not big and scary and she doesn't really need to understand the science behind it as long as she knows how to do it. But if she wants to know, I'm happy to tell her. So I'm telling her how that is technically a form of punishment. We took something away to make a behavior less likely to happen, and she was shocked.
Yep.
So I don't think people truly understand the difference. And when they limit themselves to an idea they have in their head, they can really miss out on a trainer that can really help them.
Yep. I agree.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
I find that a lot of people huge starts to like looking for a trainer. People always start with looking for a positive only approach, only uses positive reinforcement. And then back to what you were just saying, there's a lot that goes misinformed in the positive only community that say that they don't use any form of punishment. But what they're saying is they don't actually use positive punishment. But there are times when negative punishment is acceptable. So, by definition, a lot of positive only trainers still use a form of punishment, although it's not aversive, it's not an application of like pain or mistreating, mishandling, things like that. So that's something that I like being able to teach people is I 99% of what I do is positive reinforcement based.
Yeah.
And everything outside of that has to be a form of punishment. But I love using the word punishment in my lessons with clients because I love taking that stigma and like that BuzzFeed word out
Hmm.
of there, the buzzword, because it's just by definition meaning turning the behavior or reducing the likelihood that the behavior is going to occur again.
And I don't have like nowhere on my website does it say positive or balanced. Like those words, I
No,
hate them. I don't use them in my
I
when I'm
I
marketing or
agree.
anything. So my clients, like when they meet me, because I do in-home consultations. I require my clients to meet me before they sign up. And
Yep.
most people don't even think to ask because just whether it's that they don't know to ask, which is probably a very likely case in most of the time, but also even the ones who do, like they might text me a date like after they've already signed my service agreement and go, "Oh yeah, I forgot to ask." But it's because
Mhm.
just talking with me and me going over the training plan, nothing scary is going to happen to your dog. Nothing
Yeah.
painful is going to happen to your dog. So I want people to understand that don't get yourself stuck into a category and miss out on an amazing trainer for you because you have an idea in your head of something that you don't fully understand yet.
And
That's
also
super
going
important.
into it that you're hiring someone for a service with hopes that they know more than you do. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, this person is for the most part, not everybody, but is in an industry or is in this industry because they know
Mhm.
a lot about something, maybe. But I find someone has something to learn from everybody, even if it's what not to do. It's still something to learn. That doesn't mean put your dog in an uncomfortable situation or with someone that you don't necessarily trust, but it's good to go into it with an open mind, even if but while through the interview process, like, in a sense, the clients are still interviewing us and making sure that we are a good fit for what their goals are and their needs are,
Mhm.
but going into it still with an open mind that we're here to help. We're here to
Yeah.
give solutions and real solutions to real problems that you're really facing.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to that, I'm sure we'll get into it later in this episode, but because we're talking to people about how to find the right trainer for them, what I will say is in my experience in this industry, the dog trainers who own their own business or work for a local business or small business, I've never met any of us who dislike dogs. We all love
Yeah.
dogs. We want what's best for them. And in another episode in the future, we can talk about how sometimes a little discomfort can be beneficial, not pain, not,
Yeah.
trauma, but sometimes discomfort can be beneficial. But what I see a lot is when we get into the franchises or the bigger corporations, that is where I start to see trainers that are in it more for profit than they
Yeah.
are for the dog's well-being. And that is usually where I'm going to see things being abused. Not that
Yeah.
obviously the animals, I didn't mean that, but methods and things
Yeah.
being fast tracked that's not fair to the dog. But most of the time, if you're looking for a local trainer, they love dogs. Just talk to them and see what they
Yeah.
have to say and what they would do.
And I think, oh, to piggyback off of that again, using the open mind aspect, just because someone says they use things like prong collars or e-collars or choke collars or slip leads or just in an incumbents, it means a tool. They use tools to train. Just because someone says they use tools to train does not completely equate to abuse, misuse,
Yeah.
pain, suffering. Animal welfare is something that I'd love to talk about and get into
Yeah.
with my schooling into dog training. Animal welfare is a big thing that keeps in mind, and when tools are applied,
Yeah.
what draws a line at animal welfare. But tools aren't
And how do
scary.
you,
Tools are there to aid.
yeah, and how to use them safely too, because that's a difference that a very well-educated trainer is going to know how to use those tools minimally and safely,
Yep.
whereas, some newer trainers to the industry might not. And just because a trainer says that they do use tools doesn't mean they will with your dog. I have two separate clients that signed up with me last week, two new clients. One we're doing clicker training with, and the other we're doing e-collar training. And the
Yep.
client that I'm doing clicker training with has no idea that I do e-collar training, and the client I'm doing e-collar training with has no idea that I do clicker training. Because when I was talking to them, I determined which path is going to get them to their goals the safest and in the way that's best for them. Some clients can afford, like, both financially and time wise, they can afford a longer path. The client that I'm doing e-collar training with, she just moved into a new house with a fence that is not super secure, and her labs have gotten out 4 times in the last week, and they're running into the road and it's not safe. So for her, having an e-collar with, I've determined that it's a safe option for her and she can use it, because there are some clients that I will not allow an e-collar in their hand if I don't think they can handle it. But to do positive reinforcement clicker training for a recall when a dog's walking by that fence and they want to get to it would take her so long and cost
Yep.
her so much money and potentially be dangerous to her dogs. Whereas
For
an
her.
e-collar, yeah, they dragged her to the ground already. So we want to get her there safely for her safety and the dog's safety. So it's all about what is best for your dog. Just because I use e-collars, I don't use them on most dogs. Just because I
Yeah.
use prong collars doesn't mean we have to put one on your dog. So just have an open
Yep.
mind is what I want people to think.
And I think that's an important thing for trainers, especially newer trainers, just trainers in general, to keep that in mind. Start with the basis. Start
Mhm.
with finding a foundation in training that doesn't require you to use a tool immediately. We're going to talk about some red flags that come to our mind when it comes to searching for a trainer. And in my opinion, and I never speak in absolutes, like always and nevers. That's not usually a thing, because there's always an exception to every rule in everything we ever do, especially when it comes to dogs. But if someone wants to throw a tool like that on the very first lesson without meeting your dog or understanding what that dog's needs are, I almost think that's a little bit of a cause of concern, almost a red
Yeah.
flag.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get to all those fun red flags, let's talk about the main services that dog trainers offer. To me, the most common are going to be private lessons, group classes, board and trains, and day trains. Do you agree?
Mhm.
Any you want to
I
add?
would agree. I would say in Colorado, we have a lot of like hiking options too.
Yep.
People like like a group class or like a field trip adventure type day.
Yeah.
Someone will pick up a group of dogs, take them to the lake, and then bring them back or whatever. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I would say that that's the majority of it.
Main four. Okay. So private lessons, and keep in mind for our listeners, keep in mind that every dog trainer you meet, they may do things a little bit differently. So we're just going to be talking about kind of the general most common here today. So most of the time, private lessons are where your trainer meets with you and your dog, and they might start and they work, like when I do private lessons, I start with the dog, but pretty quickly we're handing the dog over to the owner and teaching the owner how to work with their dog. Sometimes this may be in your home. Sometimes you may go to a training facility and do this, but private lessons are usually a one-on-one with you, the dog owner, and the trainer.
I like to think of those as like I'm the coach. I'm
Mhm.
training my client, which is the dog owner, the person, the human, to be a dog trainer, and they train their dog in private lessons. That's how I look at it. I do a lot of like handling of the leash and handling of the dog in my private lessons as well.
Mhm.
But I would say more often than not, the leash is in my client's hands because they need to know how to do the majority of the work when I'm not there. I'm there to
Yeah.
help and coach through and remind them of the little things. And that's something else we'll talk about in another lesson of how to handle a leash. That's a whole episode. But that's an important aspect with private lessons is making sure that the trainer wants to see you doing the work, not the trainer does it, gives the dog back, and then leaves. I think that's
Yeah.
not the most effective use of a private lesson.
Yes. When do you think private lessons are the best option for people?
I think it's really comes down to a lot of commitment and determination as well as just what's going to be reasonable for the client's like day-to-day schedule too. Some people genuinely don't have the time to teach a behavior, but if the behavior is already taught, then they can
Yeah.
reinforce it. So that might be where a board and train would be a really effective starting point, but then finishing on private lessons.
Yeah.
But someone who has that determination in the day to day where they can set aside the fundamentals of the learning and then how to apply that to their dog and they
Yeah.
can rehearse that every day. Like
Yeah.
it really is what it comes down to is understanding it and then rehearsing it every day and making it a routine. And I think that's just a big thing that where private lessons can sometimes almost be to detriment to some people because of how much comes in on their end.
Yeah. I do typically, so I always recommend private lessons, sometimes in conjunction, like, and we'll talk about board and trains in a minute, but I do think that private lessons should always come after a board and train. I
Yeah,
think that sometimes a
always.
board and train should come first, but private lessons should always come after a board and train. But I tend to recommend private lessons when there's a behavior problem. So if we're
Yeah, if you don't
having,
have about an hour to 2 hours a day to commit to what the trainer is teaching you in your private lessons, then I that might not be the right program for you.
yeah, and we'll talk about those, but I find with things like, especially things like reactivity, aggression, and anxiety, but even just excited pulling on the leash or jumping, those are things where a trainer might be able to fix it in a board and train, but if you don't learn how to live with your dog in a way that helps the dog understand the expectations, it's not going to work. So those are where if you're living with your dog and having problems, you need to learn how to live with your dog. And that's where
Yep.
private lessons can really be beneficial. Now, board and trains, we'll jump right into that one since we're already kind of on it. Board and trains are typically where you send your dog to a trainer, whether that is a kennel type facility where they're staying in a kennel or they're going to a trainer's home. So there is some variability there. But the trainer lives with your dog or stays with your dog, or your dog stays somewhere other than your home for a period of time. And that period of time can vary. So you're sending your dog away. Um, I don't currently offer those. Tell me about, because you do. Let's talk about board and trains.
I do it out of my house. I only take 2 to 3 for the most part, 2 to 3 at a time, and I offer between 2 to 4 weeks of board and trains depending on what the dog's goals are, what their needs are as well. I have at one point offered, like, weekends at home, and the dogs just stay with me Monday through Friday, which is something that was super cool to implement, and I'd love to talk about that in a maybe we can dive into that in
Yes.
a different episode or the details of that, but, the board and trains I find to be super helpful to creating back to that square one where a lot of times when dealing with behavior and we're trying to either diagnose behavior, influence behavior, change behavior, and then create behavior, sometimes it's easier to just have a clean slate, like square one, where the dogs just, they're not stripped away, but they are taken away from like the areas that they're most used to. And then when they're at somewhere where they don't know, the just we're able to start at square one and we're able to really start with really good behaviors right away and then address bad behaviors right away because the dogs are so influenced into us and what we're asking because the environment has changed so much that I
Yeah.
find that board and trains are pretty helpful for getting behavior faster. Like that's what board and trains are designed for. But the private lesson on the end of that or after that is super important because the people have to know how to live with their dogs and they need to know how to work with these behaviors within their own home, not just my home.
I would say so. Board and trains, because they are the most pricey option usually. So they're not
Mhm.
always financially available to everybody. I tend to prefer private lessons over board and trains in most cases, just because I do think that the human that lives with the dog needs to learn how to do all that with the dog. However, what I will say, I tend to recommend board and trains when we have a severe problem. If a dog has severe anxiety, severe fearfulness, severe aggression, or really severe reactivity, that is where I usually recommend a board and train because it's like a reset. And I think the best way to describe it to people is there's an unhealthy relationship between you and your dog. And people don't like to hear that. But you're
Nope.
your dog's leader in the household and your dog is going to follow. So if your dog is struggling with these big, big problems, usually it's because there's something going wrong in the relationships in the household with the people. So by removing the dog from that, now the dog can build a new baseline and the trainer can
Yeah.
come in and teach the dog the behaviors. And then it's much easier to bring the dog home. And now we do the private lessons and the trainer can then start to figure out why that relationship went wrong and start to work on that separate from just teaching the dog the behaviors. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Because I feel like in under 7 days, for the most part, when a new dog is acclimated into my house, being around new dogs, new people, new sounds, new smells, new this, new that. In under 7 days, I'm not saying that the dog's created change. I believe that I can find out where this behavior was sourced from
Hmm.
in that unhealthy part of the relationship between dog and person. And it's easier for me to relay that information back to the client because I live in a house. I don't live in a boarding facility. I have a relatability with what I'm seeing with clients and their dogs. And not that boarding facilities are bad because that's not what I'm saying at all. But these are some things that some boarding facilities aren't going to be able to see because they aren't living a normal life with your dog.
I kind of think of it like when I take my car to get work done. Is it something simple like an oil change or getting my brakes replaced? Or I'm really not a car person. So like I've had my brakes done, I had a starter replaced. Those are simple things. I showed up, I waited in the waiting room, they fixed it. To me, those are private lessons. Board and trains are when I need to drop my car off and they need to diagnose and really figure out what is going on with it. That's the best analogy I can come up with. Interesting question for you. Would you say it's true that the people who need a board and train the most are the people most resistant to drop their dog off and leave them?
Ooh, again, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I would say a lot of times, yes, oftentimes people who have the biggest reservations with dropping their dogs off with some stranger, which I 100% agree and
Yeah.
understand like where some anxieties come from within that. But I would say that a lot of people who hold on to that typically have some sort of unhealthy attachment to their dogs.
Yeah. And we're not saying like when Sam says unhealthy attachment, we're not saying don't love your dog. Love your dog.
Oh,
My dog, I don't have human children. I don't plan on it. And I swear to God, when my shepherd dies one day, I think I will die with him. I am that attached to him. But with that attachment comes very healthy boundaries and
yes.
understanding that he is a dog and I'm a human and there needs to be, I'm not just his companion, I'm his employer, I'm his leader, I'm his advocate and his sense of safety. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. So I see this a lot with anxiety. When a dog has extreme anxiety, I almost always see anxiety in the human. And there's an
Mhm.
unhealthy attachment where I want you and your dog to love each other. But if you're too dependent on each other, you're going to have big problems.
Yep. My other hot take is people, just to piggyback off that, people who have that, um, they have separation anxiety from their own dog, thus
Mhm.
creating the dog having separation anxiety away from them. However, um, again, I can't speak in absolutes, but I oftentimes find that those people also have some unhealthy boundaries with other people in their lives as well. So
Mhm.
it's sometimes a reflection on the person, and yes, the dog sometimes, if depending on their behaviors. But it's an interesting way to reflect on your own behavior and your own relationships with other people outside of a human
Yeah.
canine relationship.
Yeah. Fun fact, folks, if you're ever out there wondering if maybe you want to become a dog trainer, you got to be really good at being a therapist too, particularly a marriage
Yes.
therapist.
Yeah.
Because it's almost always in the household, you gotta solve problems. So, I love
Yep.
all of that. Tell me about day trains. We both offer day trains. We might do them a little differently. I do day trains in my clients' homes. Where do you do your day
Yeah.
trains? Okay.
I do day trains where I pick them up in the morning. They spend the day with me, whether that's coming back to my field and my training within like the confines of a controlled space,
Yeah.
or they go on like field trips with me to parks or
Yeah.
stores or something like wherever the dog's ready at and whatever the dog needs. That's what we're doing. But it's really adaptable to whatever the dogs. For me, it's whatever the dogs are needing and in need of.
There is such a range in services for day trains because I know so many dog trainers that do day trains, and we all do it a little differently. Probably the biggest distinction between day trains and private lessons is that in private lessons, the dog owner is present and involved. And in day trains, usually the trainer and the dog are working one on one, but the owner is not present, is probably the easiest way to describe
How
that.
long are your day trains?
So I do mine, I think, differently than I do yours. I did sometimes on occasion, I do field trips where I'll pick up the dog and take them, usually out in public. Those are more for my public access skills dogs. So I'll take them to the park or the beach or a shopping center. Those are a couple hours, but my most popular programs that I offer right now, I'm actually only at the owner's home for about an hour. And that gives me plenty of time to tire the dog's brain out and get in practice and repetitions so that I do that 3 times a week. And on the fourth day, me and the owner do a private lesson. And the benefit to that I find that I explain to my clients is that that allows me to get to know your dog very well, to get a lot of practice and repetition in with them. So that's less repetition the owner needs to do to start a behavior. They still need to maintain it, and that's what I teach them to do, but I teach the behaviors. But the dog never needs to leave their home, so it's not like they're dropping the dog off, and it's not so much to do, at least the way that I've structured mine, I don't do giant like year board and trains are probably gonna do very in-depth problems. My day trains are more for the owner who just doesn't have time to practice every day. So my
Okay.
day trains, it's not that I recommend them to any different type of problem behavior than I do my private lessons. For me, it comes down to how much time does the owner have to practice? And do I benefit at all from getting to know the dog a little better? I really like my day train options for leash manners and pulling on the leash, and
Yeah.
sometimes reactivity. Because when I'm doing a private lesson, I'm going to talk the owner's ear off the whole time with information they need. When I'm with just the dog, I can focus on just the dog. So I'm not there for very long, but it's a very beneficial time. And I don't need a lot more than an hour most days.
Your clients just give you keys that you go in and let yourself in, do your thing, and then lock up and leave?
Sometimes I don't like having keys on my person. That's a lot of responsibility. Most of my clients stay home. And I always tell my clients, like, because I schedule them by week. So sometimes I have clients that they don't necessarily, they're retired or they're coming and going or they work from home. If there's a day that I'm there for a day train and they want it to be a private lesson and they want to be involved, absolutely. But sometimes my clients are busy with their newborn babies or they just want to take a nap or they need to go to the grocery store really quick. So most of the time the owner's there when I get there and then maybe they go out and they pop back in around the time I need to leave. Sometimes a lot of houses in my area, they have keypads or some automated way. So, like, I had a client who on her phone, she had an app that could open her garage door. So when I got there, I would text her because she was like with her, her kids were doing some summer activity. She would just open the garage door from her phone. I'd go in through the garage. And then when I left, I would text her and she'd close the door. So things
Okay.
like that. But most owners are just kind of cleaning or taking care of their kids
I
or
see.
something like that. Let's move on to group classes. So, do you teach group classes?
I do. I do offer group classes right now. This is
Yeah.
something that I've kind of gone intermittently in and out of over the years. There's a lot of fun to them. There's a lot of chaos that also can ensue with some group classes and depending on like public spaces that are being used. But currently I offer a drop-in obedience group class at the moment once a week and it's open to everybody. So sometimes there's people who are a little bit more advanced and then there's people who didn't even know they needed treats in a treat pouch to come into class. So
Yeah.
I have kind of a wider range of different, like, backgrounds into training, and I love being able to bring people into a common ground of obedience and of, like, a level of control and fun with their dogs as well. Um, I think that that's a fun thing and an important thing to have in a group class setting is how much fun are the people and the dogs having.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, so it's probably relatively self explanatory, but group classes are where there's a group of you that are learning from the trainer.
Right.
So, and there's a huge variety of, you can find group classes on anything. There's puppy classes, there's basic obedience, more advanced obedience. I teach a reactive dog class, which I'm having a lot of fun with. So there's a whole variety that we can do a whole episode on. But typically speaking, group classes, at least for me, I recommend group classes for dogs with no behavior problems that want to learn obedience. So if somebody has an easy dog, they can jump into an obedience class and get most of the skills they need. If they have a puppy, I find it beneficial for the exposure aspect, getting to see other dogs and people. For
Yep.
more behavior problems, I typically, if finances aren't an issue, I would recommend private lessons because they're more expensive, but they're going to help the owner and the dog more. If
Yeah.
finances are an issue, group classes are usually cheaper, but most people struggle to learn new skills in a group class. So
Yeah.
when I get into my behavior problem classes, I keep them very small. And if possible, I always like to do one or two private lessons first, but I don't require it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of group classes can be great to work around distractions, but those distractions can be a struggle if you're not ready for them.
Yeah, and it depends. Yeah, it definitely depends on the skill level of the dog and the person who are attending classes as well. Um, Sometimes those environments can be really overwhelming for certain dogs,
Mhm.
and they aren't the environment to be learning in. Those are the types of environments that the behavior should already like be learned, and that is a place that they can rehearse and practice it. And that's where doing some one-on-ones with with that trainer that you trust to teach you the leash manners or the attention and focus or something, so that way the foundation of the house is already built
Yeah.
versus trying to build a house in a hurricane. Like
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess the gist of this is in general, if you're listening to this, probably because you're looking at how the heck do I hire a dog trainer? Who I choose to summarize it. So private lessons are typically going to be best for behavior problems, or if you learn better with one-on-one help. Group classes are going to be better to work around distractions or to improve. So if your dog is not having behavior problems, they're good. Or if you're going into a class that is specific to that behavior problem, they can be good. Board and trains are going to be better if you don't have a lot of time to work with your dog and practice on your own, or if you have a big behavior problem that would benefit from that kind of reset. And then day trains, depending on the trainer doing them in the exact service, they can be great for things like public access skills. They're great when you don't have the time to do the practice, but you don't want to drop your dog off and leave them somewhere. But again, day trains for me are just like board and trains. They should be followed by private lessons.
And I
Perfect.
think of those private lessons afterwards are like pop quizzes for the trainers. It's our time to quiz our owners, our clients to the knowledge and to the curriculum that was taught to them and their dog, and
Yeah.
making sure that it's a rehearsal of behavior that has to continue well past the last time you meet with your trainer. Like,
Yeah.
so that's something else that trainers a good trainer is training you so much that you never need them again.
Yep. I always tell my clients at the end, I'm like, I would love to hear from you, but I hope I don't have to. Like,
Exactly.
please text. I got last week. I was so lucky. I had three different clients last week out of nowhere that I haven't seen in months all send me really happy success stories and photos that just made my week. Like, I think I literally emailed them back. I was like, I needed that today. Thank you. So I want you to feel so proud that you call me and tell me, but I want you to not have to call me, basically.
All right, so
So,
we kind of talked into the services, but I guess like where do we find a trainer? Like what I guess that's a good
ooh,
place to start. So I
that
have
is a
an
good place
idea
to start.
why I think Google isn't the number one place to start.
Okay, tell me
Because
more.
I'm not crazy into like SEO marketing. Again, that's just not really my thing. I have a lot of more word of mouth clients than anything, which
Okay.
I like more of, but I don't think Google is always going to be your number one choice to start. It could be a good place to platform, but I don't.
Mhm.
The first page and businesses that you're going to come up when you search dog trainers near me or dog trainers local or something along those lines, the first three that are going to come up on your search are the three top who are paying the most for that spot. Just because a bigger company has more money to put towards their advertising does not mean they have that money to be putting towards their skills of training. So that's
I have an
my hot
interesting
take.
counterpart, though. I agree with your hot take, but I'm going to add on to it and be a devil's advocate here for a second. I am a little bit, and I don't mean this and I'm better than you. I'm more interested in SEO, right? So
Yeah.
I have focused a little more in the last year on learning about that stuff. And I don't know if you remember this, but a couple weeks ago, you or Heather had shared this post about burnout and how you're like, it's so exhausting to have clients that don't listen to you. I have not had that problem in so long, and I think it's because I have optimized the wording on my website and my SEO to only attract clients that would be my perfect clients. So depending on the scenario, I think that if you were to search on Google and you found a website where the wording speaks to you, it's worth reaching out to that trainer. Because
Agreed.
if you're looking at a website and you're like, "Oh, just is," like, you're gonna scroll if it doesn't speak to you. Now, you're right that the companies with bigger wallets are gonna be top of the page, so I would do some scrolling on that if you're using Google. also
Yep.
look at the reviews. There have to be reviews. And newer trainers or trainers with less money are going to take less volume than a big company. So like I'm one person, I can only take so many clients at a time, whereas a big company is going to get 30 clients on any given day. They're going to get more reviews. So the number of reviews isn't as big of a deal as the quality of reviews.
Agreed.
Where do you think they should look for a trainer?
I don't even think like Facebook groups are always the best led, but that it is at least gives you some direction to start because
Mhm.
usually like word of mouth Facebook groups or something, people will drop their opinions or experiences of trainers that they've had and things like that. Word of mouth is super strong. Not necessarily saying ask your neighbor, but uh, word of mouth is very strong for people who
Yeah.
have actually hired for that service and have hands on experience with it. But it's tough because there's so many different places to look, and there's so many different places that you might not be looking and then come stumble upon a trainer. So,
Yeah. I agree. Word of mouth is definitely the best. I screw it. Go ask your neighbor. Even in the Facebook groups, don't get me wrong. If I'm scrolling on Facebook and I see somebody asking for a dog trainer, I will throw my own name in there. And I usually try to do something like, here's where you can find my reviews.
personalized.
Like, let's chat. Like, I want it personalized, not just, oh, like hire me in a link. But if I was looking for a dog trainer, I wouldn't necessarily want the people who are like, I'm a dog trainer. I want to hear who has a really good experience with a dog trainer.
Yep.
Another place that I would not look for a dog trainer is recommendation. This hot take, the whole veterinary industry is about to hate me for a second, and then I'm going to explain. If you go to your vet's office and they have cards up front, or your local pet store, or wherever, and they have dog trainer business cards, and they're like, oh, yeah, we recommend this person, ask more questions. Because I
Yeah.
worked in the veterinary industry, and what dog trainers, and this is not just dog trainers, groomers or pet stores, we all do this.
Yep.
They will just take in cookies and they don't even use this vet and they just drop off business cards and the vets will just
Yep.
put the business cards up, but they know nothing about that trainer. So if like there's one veterinarian local who's been recommending me and we kind of know each other through the facility that I teach my group classes out of. She knows me, she knows my training style. That's different than a dog trainer that just dropped their business cards off and they're like,
Right.
well, I don't know, here, take this card. So be careful about that too.
Yeah. I would, I was going to be like, yes, I believe I agree with everything you said, except trust my vet because I think there's some of my business cards that are still out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there are, but you have to ask. Just
Yeah.
don't just take I think my vet I was there picking up Graham's medication the other day. There's like 10 different dog trainer business cards and they're dusty. Like you could tell they haven't been touched. Some dog trainer just dropped them off 3 years ago.
Yep.
So ask questions, look for people's experiences. If you don't know people local to you with dogs, you can look on Facebook. You can look on I kind of hate the Nextdoor app because it's drama, but
Yeah. I don't
go
use
to
it.
your local forums, go to your local pet stores, call your vet and ask if they know somebody, not just who they know of.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, let's get into red flags in dog trainers. It's much easier to tell people what they don't want than it is to tell them what they do want. I have a list. I'm sure you have a list, but
Yep.
we've kind of
Go
already
ahead.
touched on this. The very first thing I had was a red flag is that when a trainer offers board and trains, but they don't include follow up lessons. Now, how they do their pricing, that can vary. But a trainer should never just say, oh, yeah, we'll do the board and train. You don't need private lessons. There should always be at least one, if not more, included in your package, ideally, so that you come back. Okay.
Agreed. Next one.
Next one.
I think a lot of terminology is super important to know when trainers use which word, what it means. And especially it's hard though, because certain trainers mean things differently than others. But I think anyone and this is something we can talk about in another episode or dive a little bit more deeper into the psychology behind it. But people who use the big buzzwords like you need to be the alpha in your pack, or you need to teach submission, or you need submission from your dog, or things like that. Because those are big words that uh, people fall for that thinking that that's how they're going to get a compliant and obedient dog. And
Yep.
maybe, but
Yeah,
not
I
likely.
agree. I'll even have a hot take that not all. So, all of you dog trainers out there that do this that are listening to me, if you're a good one, I don't mean this about you. But I find that usually the trainers that are using you must be alpha, you must be top dog, all that stuff, they usually also call themselves a master trainer. Yeah. That's one phrase that for the most part I stay away from it.
A lot of
Which
There's a lot of hoopla with the applications of training that those types of trainers also use, and I won't get into
yeah,
that one.
Which kind of brings us really quick. We can do a whole episode on this if we need to, but there is, for the listeners, there is no nationwide or international certification for being a dog trainer. There are different certifications that you can get, but the industry is not regulated. Even if a trainer goes through the hoops to get certified in some whatever certificate they want to go after, doesn't mean that they've been on the, boots on the ground training the dogs. They can get it, but that doesn't mean they're good at it.
Yeah, you can know the answers on all the tests and you can know the right things to say, but um, in this industry, a lot of success is shown through hands-on work and how many dogs that we've been able to get our hands on and train and influence, and not just the dogs, but the people too. I find that that's a big, like, a, a big thing into what claims a good successful dog trainer as well, training both humans and dogs. Red flag number 3. What do you
Okay.
think?
My next one is any trainer that guarantees dog training. I
Mhm.
do think that a trainer should guarantee support, but I don't think that it's ethical for any trainer to guarantee results because a
Yep.
lot of that, if not most of it, is dependent on the work the dog owner is doing at home. You need a dog trainer that can effectively coach you on how to do it, and then you need to do it. If you're not practicing and maintaining the habits that we teach you, we cannot guarantee that your dog's going to do anything.
I had a phone call with someone who was asking about specifically e-collar and off-leash training for their dog. And they were asking why I recommended a 4-week service, 4-week board and train for that versus another competitor offering 2 weeks and a guarantee. And I said the same thing. Trainers are people who speak in absolutes and guarantees. What happens if they can't meet that deadline? What are they going to do to get your dog there to meet that deadline? In my experience, in those quick, short board and trains, trainers are going to use a lot more pressure on on the dogs, whether that's through e-collar pressure, leash pressure, spatial pressure, anything. They're just going to use a lot more pressure to get the dogs to do something faster.
Yeah.
And while that's an area that can be used tactfully and successfully, I don't think that that's something that should be used as far as a deadline or a guarantee in the
Yeah.
results of dog training. And that's a big red flag when someone puts timeline and a guarantee on it, because dogs are still living, breathing, thinking individual sentient beings.
Yeah.
And there's my 2-week time frame is very different than a dog's 2-week time frame.
Yeah. And it's not ethical or okay for me when I see trainers that rush the process just for the sake of being quick. You have to go
Like
at the dog's
how the dogs
pace.
feel.
Yeah. You have to do it at the dog's pace. You have to make sure that the dog is comfortable with what you're doing and that they understand what you're doing. A lot of the times with those quick, oh, I can guarantee results and it's going to be really fast. The dog is miserable the whole time. The dog doesn't even understand what
Mhm.
you're doing. The dog is just along for the ride. And
They're just
that
doing
to
they're just
me,
doing the first things to get the person to shut up.
yeah, big red flag right there.
Yep.
Okay. Next one.
Okay.
You got one?
Number 4, I would say, and this is kind of a personal experience thing, but also a little bit of it. Um, if a trainer doesn't even have a dog themselves almost.
Yeah.
And then that there's always like there's never and nevers and absolutes, but if a trainer has never or even worked with your type of dog, I think that
Yeah.
almost is not necessarily a red flag, but it also could be somewhere where you turn away. Someone who's
Yeah.
never lived with a dog, I can't reasonably understand why someone would pay that person to train a dog if they've never lived with one.
Yeah.
That's
I could see scenarios where like a trader who, they did have their own dogs and then as they get a little older or their business gets crazy busy and maybe a dog passes away and they're like, right now it's just not the ideal time to add another.
Yeah.
That I understand. But when they're a dog trainer and they've never trained their own dogs, they've never lived with a dog, it's like, do you even like dogs? Because I love dogs. I can't imagine my life without them. I learn the most from my own dogs because they're the dogs I live with. So,
right.
yeah, I think you're right there.
Yeah. That's a personal story. Old facility I worked at hired a gentleman in his early 60s who had never trained a dog
Oh,
before. He was
yeah.
very interested in learning how to train a dog and was very open to their methods of training. And it just was really hard morally to me being a person in like the sales at that point in that business, at that company to get people to say, "Yes, give me your money, not me, give this company your money." And I trust that this person can train your dog. Like,
Yeah. I
I just
don't get
give
me
my money.
wrong. I learn from all of my clients' dogs, but I don't learn how to be a dog trainer on my clients' dogs. I learned
Yes.
that through my own dogs and when I was a baby trainer doing volunteer work and taking the courses that I took and going to the seminars, that's where I learned to be a dog trainer. Maybe
Right.
their dog might teach me something because their dog all dogs are different and you learn something from
Right.
every dog you work with, but I'm not learning how to be a dog trainer on my clients' dogs.
Maybe it's a yellow flag. Maybe it's something you gotta look into.
So my next one is when trainers don't listen to what you want, what your goals are when they tell you what your goals should be. That's a red flag to me. You're not going to
Agreed.
get anywhere if you're trying to reach goals that you don't even want.
Being heard is a big thing in as a trainer and doing consultations and meeting with new people. Their problems are very real. If people weren't having real problems, in reality, they're not going to probably reach out to someone to bring into their home, to bring
Yeah.
into like some private life aspects of what they're going on and what they have going on in their lives. People
Yeah.
aren't really going to do that unless they need help or a solution. And then there's the other side of that where people call us in that want our help, but
Yeah.
then don't want to hear it. But that's
Yeah.
different.
There are times where we have to have a hard conversation with a client and tell them that their goals for their dog are unrealistic. But I want to know what my
Unfair.
clients, yeah, like what are you frustrated? Are you stressed? Are you embarrassed when you walk your dog around the neighborhood? All of that information is going to help me help you get to where you want to be. I don't want to ever just come in and go, oh, you tell me that your dog's terrible on a leash, and I tell you you need your dog to heel on the left side at all times. Let's figure out how you want your walk with your dog to go. And let's get there. And sometimes we do
Yep.
heel, and sometimes
Yep.
we don't need heel.
Yep.
All right. But we'll make the last two quick. Not being
Yes.
able to meet your trader first is a big red flag to me. So that company that we used to work for, you were not one of them because you were a trainer first. But I don't like when the person who is selling you the dog training is not the person training you. Because the person training your dog is the person you need to learn from and the person you
Right.
need to be comfortable handling your dog. I make it a requirement. I must meet my clients in person before I will let them sign a service agreement and do training with me. Because not only do I want to make sure that you are not crazy and going to murder me in your house, but I want to make sure that you feel like you can learn from me and it feels like we're cheating the system if your trainer, quote unquote, comes up and sells your program and they go, well, actually, this other person's going to show up and train them.
I find sometimes people are surprised when I meet up for consultations and they're like, "Oh, you're the trainer that's going to be meeting with me?" And I'm like, "The one and only."
Yeah. Just me, one
Like,
woman
yeah,
show over here.
I swear it'll be me. I'll be there.
Yeah. My last one is I think it's a red flag when a trainer will take any case thrown their way. I think there's a lot of respect to be had in a trainer that tells you, like I tell my clients if they're going to shop around or, just in storytelling, I say you should always ask the dog trainer that you're considering, what type of cases do you not take? And if they say, oh no, I take everything, red flag, walk away. There should always
Yeah.
be something. And that doesn't have to mean that they're just uneducated. The best dog trainers in the world always have more to learn, but, like, I don't take human aggression mostly because I don't enjoy it, and if I don't
Yeah.
enjoy working with your dog, you're not gonna get the best help possible. I would rather you go to a trainer who enjoys working with human aggression. You're gonna get a much better experience. Whereas I love reactivity that is fear-based. I will talk to your phone, you call me at 8 p.m., sure, let's talk, I'll help you. The human aggression case called me at 8 p.m., I'd ignore it. So your dog trainer should not take everything. They should be taking what they feel comfortable with, what they feel like they are educated enough in and have
We're
experience
the
with,
most successful at.
and what they like. Yeah. So it is a red flag if your dog trainer says they're the best thing in the world and they can just take anything. Run the other way.
Yep. Agreed.
Any? Perfect. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we touched on a lot of it. There's so much more to go over, and a lot of what we're talking and reiterating is simply that. Like, I don't know. I didn't reinvent a wheel. I didn't create some new novel concept in dog training. I'm
Yeah.
absorbing little bits and pieces from other world-renowned trainers that are really truly the best of the best, and absorbing it and then regurgitating it to other people. So,
Yeah.
uh, we we're professionals, but we're still not perfect. So
Yeah.
I'm open to hearing what other people have to say too.
Yeah, absolutely. Any good dog trainer is going to want you to find the right trainer for you, even if it is not them. So
Yeah.
don't feel bad that you talked with someone. And even if you met with them and you don't feel like they're the right fit, don't feel bad. Find the right fit
Yep.
for you. It's going to be better for you and your dog.
Pay them for their time. Thank them for their service. Send them on their way.
Yeah.
Your trainer will be just fine. If you don't get the right fit, we're gonna feel it too. Don't feel obligated just because you meet with someone either. Pay for the consultation or evaluation and get your own interview process. What questions you want to ask, what things you want to make sure that your trainer knows are super important to you. That your trainer is also setting realistic expectations with you from the get go.
Yeah.
A trainer who's just gonna blow smoke and just tell you things that you want to hear just for a sale. Those are people you're definitely going to want to avoid.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask questions either. Like a lot of my clients, because I do in home consultations, we get in detail. They're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to be asking all these questions." Don't be. If your
I
dog
don't.
trainer if your dog trainer can't answer your questions, or if they're frustrated and don't want to, they're not the trainer for you. So ask away. If we run out of time, we run out of time, and I'll say, "I'm so sorry. I have to be at my next one in 5 minutes, and we'll talk later on the phone." Like, ask the question. Okay, perfect. So, just like always, I know this is episode number 2, so I guess there's no always yet, but you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at On Dog Terms. You can find my business page, same thing, Instagram and TikTok at MJ underscore the dog trainer. I'm going to put a link in the show notes that will lead you to a Google form. So if you have a question for us that you want us to answer on the podcast, you can either reach out to us on social media or click that link and do it there. And then, Sam, where can I find you?
Facebook or Instagram, Canine Insight LLC, or by email, canineinsight6@gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. All right, Sam, I will see you next time.
Right. See ya. Bye, guys.